Good afternoon, and welcome to the Jewish Policy Center webinar. I am Shoshana Bryan, Senior Director of the JPC and your host. I feel as if I should say welcome back, since so many of you were here yesterday with Hussein Abdul Hussein to learn more about Arab public opinion and the Arab street. I'm happy to welcome you back today. Keep sending that invitation to your friends. We're all inundated with millions of bits of information and so many terrible images, but I'm hoping that through these webinars, we will get a broader framework for understanding and evaluating what we get from the newspapers, Twitter, talking heads, and the media, and the government. I am pleased to have Professor Ephraim Inbar with us today in our series. He is one of the true experts in Israel's national security plans and programs, and in the impact of those security matters on Israel's body politic. We're going to talk about both of those today. But before we go to Ephraim, here is your JPC commercial. We were established in 1985 as a nonprofit organization, providing analysis of foreign and domestic policies. We support a strong American defense capability, U.S.-Israel security cooperation, and missile defense. Aside from our security interests, the JPC advocates for small government, low taxes, free trade, fiscal responsibility, energy security, free speech, and intellectual diversity. I know it's a big, wide net that we cast for a small organization. Right now, however, our most important job is to support the legitimacy and security of Israel against anyone who would deny them. And now more than ever, we support the government of Israel and the IDF in defending the people of Israel and bringing the perpetrators of the massacres, hostage-taking, and rocket barrages to justice. You can find us on our website at jewishpolicycenter.org. That's jewishpolicycenter.org. There you can find our Insight articles. Right now, we have a group of great guest authors for Insight, and so that's worth poking at. And you can also find our magazine in Focus Quarterly. Sorry. You can also find our previous webinar programs. And now to our guest. Professor Ephraim Inbar is president of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. He is, as I said, an expert on Israeli strategic doctrine and Israeli public opinion on national security issues, but he's also an expert in Middle East policy, Israeli-Palestinian diplomacy, of which I suspect there won't be much anymore, and Israel-Turkey relations, which is a sort of overlooked area these days, and it shouldn't be. He was also the founding director of the Begin-Sadat Center for Strategic Studies, known as the BESA Center. Ephraim is a professor of political studies at Bar-Ilan University in Israel. He's also a man of the academic world, having been a visiting professor at Georgetown, Johns Hopkins, and Boston universities, a visiting scholar at the Woodrow Wilson Center, a NATO fellow, and a visiting fellow at London's International Institute for Strategic Studies. He is the author of a number of books, and their titles tell you a lot. For example, Outcast Countries in the World Community, War and Peace in Israeli Politics, Rabin and Israel's National Security Policy, Israel-Turkish Détente, and Israel's National Security Issues and Challenges since the Yom Kippur War. He holds an MA and a PhD from the University of Chicago and did his undergraduate work at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And now, Ephraim Inbar, the floor is yours.
Shalom to everybody from Jerusalem. I know Shoshana for many years, and I'm happy that you are hosting me at your important organization. I'll say a few words about the importance of this war. We had rounds of violence with Hamas many times before, but this is different. And it is different for two reasons. Mainly, first reason is the magnitude of destruction they were successful in bringing upon Israel. Over 1,300 people dead, over 2,400 people wounded, maybe more. We are still looking for bodies. And this is something that we have not seen before. It's the first time since the independence wars that our kibbutzim were overrun. atrocities happen there, which are terrible. The second reason, and this is the most important reason, is that the attack basically cracked Israel's deterrence. In the Middle East, you cannot survive without deterrence. States that have no deterrence invite aggression. And this event of 3 weeks ago has made a terrible dent in our deterrence, and we have to restore deterrence. And this is indeed the main goal of the war. We have to exact a price from our enemies that everybody in the Middle East will understand that if they cross certain red lines, they will be heavily punished, and this is a project they should not engage in. And we have to make it very clear. This type of goal is translated into a military mission. The military mission that the government announced is to dismantle Hamas of its military capabilities. And I think it's very well defined. We cannot kill Hamas. Hamas as an organization, as an ideological organization, cannot be destroyed. Unfortunately, over 60% of the Palestinians support Hamas. It's tragic for them and, of course, for us. So this idea that Israel should be eradicated by the Palestinian national movement and by the Islamic radicals is something that cannot be done away. It's deep in their psyche, it's deep in their education system. And therefore, our military goal is far-reaching, but the political goal is very modest. We have to go in, and this is not easy, to go in and look after the weapons they have. We have to go in and find the military caches, all missile production capabilities, to go after the leadership and try to capture them or kill them. And this is cannot be done from air, quite clearly, despite the fact that the first stage of the war is by air, in order to make it easier for the ground operation that is supposed to come. This is going to be a very costly and lengthy operation, primarily because military challenges are one, urban warfare, second, tunnel warfare. And this type of warfare requires great effort. The Israeli army is training for this type of scenarios. And remains to be seen how well we'll do in meeting those challenges, if indeed ground cooperation will be large-scale ground operation will be scaled. So this is the first observation I want to make. Also, we have to understand that it is not only our war. This war involves the radical Islamic axis. It's Iran behind it. And it's quite clear that Hamas, everybody knows, except maybe the American administration, that Hamas is funded by Iran partly, is trained by Iran, is equipped by Iran, We've just seen a month ago a meeting of Iranians with Hezbollah, their other proxy, and Hamas in Lebanon. I don't have a transcript of this meeting, but I'm pretty sure that it includes some kind of planning or discussion of how to attack Israel. So Iran is behind. Also Qatar that funds the Muslim Brotherhood all over the Middle East, all over the world. And of course, it funds Hamas, partly with Israeli permission. That it's a mistake that we have to correct. But Iran is not alone. Iran is part of an alliance, anti-American alliance. It includes Russia and China. So we are fighting not only to restore deterrence for Israel, we are fighting against a global alliance, anti-American alliance. I believe that people in Washington do understand it. I'm not sure that all of them understand. But this is a war for destroying evil, for defending the Western civilization from the barbarians. And the atrocities committed by Hamas represent a barbaric culture. So this war is very important for Israel. This war is very important for the West, if it's willing to survive the attack of the barbarians. And America came to support of Israel very openly. And I believe that Biden has a genuine sympathy for Israel and the Jewish people. But of course, America has its own interests. And they sent their air carriers to Eastern Mediterranean in order to prevent escalation of the war, which doesn't suit the American interests. It also sends the carriers to preserve the tacit nuclear deal with Iran. It sends the carriers to evacuate possibly American citizens. And also it sends the air carriers and American diplomats to babysit Israel. And they are very involved in managing the war, taking care of humanitarian needs of the Palestinians, less so the humanitarian needs of over 1 million Israeli refugees. And my greatest concern is that they might intervene during the course of the war and stop Israel from accomplishing its mission. In Middle Eastern wars, we have a political clock, and usually Israel has to listen, not immediately, but has to listen eventually to what is said in Washington. And America, of course, will give the tone to the international arena. It has, so far, it prevented anti-Israeli resolutions at the UN. And hopefully, the Americans will give us enough time. The last issue I want to address before we'll open it for Q&A is the possibility of a multi-front war. And we've seen already Hezbollah starting to shoot at Israel. It's low intensity, it's skirmishes, but of course it can escalate. The key to a multi-front war, and I'm not talking only about Hezbollah, I'm talking about Iranian militias shooting missiles from Syria I'm talking about Iranian operatives trying to foment trouble in the West Bank. Hamas is there. And also Israeli Arabs. Most Israeli Arabs are, of course, law-abiding citizens, but it would suffice a few thousand of them to cause great trouble. They can block roads, they can stop, dispatch of troops from certain bases that are close to their villages. And what's worse, of course, they can try to have riots and kill Jewish citizens in mixed cities. So there is a possibility of multi-front war. The key is in Tehran. The key to a multi-front is in Tehran, and it depends upon their evaluation, whether this is the time to implement their population-centric strategy in order to weaken Israel to a point where it will not be able to withstand the pressure from outside. They think, they understand they cannot win a conventional war, but they are attacking Israeli civilians, hoping that they will run away. This is what they are after. If they evaluate that Israel is at a very weak point, then they might ignite a multi-front war. It remains to be seen if they'll do so. The mood in Israel is, can be interpreted in several ways. Of course, there is a lot of gloom about surprise attack. But at the same time, and maybe this is the only bright thing in our, what's happening now, is the spirit of Israel. We see great determination to fight the war, knowing well that there might be a lot of casualties. Israelis have military experience. And we see also Israelis waiting in line for hours, for days at airports, trying to get back home to fight in the IDF. So this is a spirit. This is what I expect of Israelis. And hopefully we'll have the talent and the time to vanquish Hamas. I'll stop now.
Thank you, Ephraim. You have covered a lot of ground, and we have a lot of questions. So I'm going to try to put them together. The first one has to do with the beginning of the war on October 7th. Israel clearly has very good intelligence on what happens inside of Gaza. So it raises three questions from people who are listening. First of all, did Israeli security miss what was happening, or was information incorrectly interpreted? The second question is it possible that Israel's intelligence network was hacked? And third, is it possible that some of those Palestinians from Gaza who get work permits to be in Israel, legitimate work permits to be in Israel and work for Israelis, were actually spies for Hamas, providing information back to Hamas?
Well, the third question is easy to answer. It's yes. We found documents which they described those kibbutzim and the number, the house number, everything. So there were spies, obviously. I don't think you can really prevent surprises, generally. There are always, we are human beings, and we think in a certain way, and the enemy understands it, they can surprise us. We shouldn't have been surprised, in my view. I think that, but there was a concept that Hamas is deterred, and they believe that Hamas wants to rule the intelligence and to order to rule, they have to provide certain things to the people, a minimum, and we are wrong. My colleague, General Amidrov, is a well-known intelligence officer, and he was the national advisor, security advisor of Netanyahu. He admitted he was mistaken. Yeah, many of us were mistaken, and they fooled us. They fooled us clearly, and there will be a thorough investigation after the war, and some heads will roll probably, and c'est la vie. We are hopefully we'll learn from this incident, but as I said, you cannot prevent surprises. Well, surprises of this magnitude probably you can, but it's a soul-searching process.
So I think we're going to leave those kinds of questions for later, after the battle is done and the Israeli government and the Knesset put together a commission, put together whatever kind of investigation they need to put together. So we'll let that go for a minute and turn to the question of the United States. So the adage goes in the United States, countries don't have friends, they have interests. Maybe. Now, the United States' interest as relates to Israel has often been to constrain Israel, to keep it from acting perhaps as far into enemy territory as it would like to, finish a job that it would like to finish. So the question is, as Israelis see it, I know how Americans see it, but as Israelis see it, is the United States an ally, a patron, a colonizer, or a friend only as long as Jews have power? And what should we make of the fact that an American general was sent to Israel, a Marine general was sent to Israel to talk about urban warfare with the Israeli military, as if the Israeli military doesn't know what to do with that? How do Israelis feel about that?
It's strange a bit. Of course, we are ready to learn from everybody, and the Americans have some experience in urban warfare, like Fallujah and other things. We had a dialogue with the Americans when they were in Iraq, a regular dialogue, and I think some of the lessons learned there were transferred to Israel. There is unease, certain unease about the American heavy presence in the situation. And as I expressed my concern, I think they might stop us at a certain point. The Americans have a clear interest, I think, not to allow Israel to win too decisively. Kissinger did it in 73. In 67, maybe it was too short for the Americans to be able to react. But now it's a long war, and they have an interest in the Arab war. So, although it's quite clear to me that they want a strong Israel, we are the whip here. So, who else is going to use force in the Middle East apart from us? Maybe the Turks, but the Turks are not such good allies to America. So they want a strong Israel, but not too strong one, not too independent one. And they are the superpower who has far-reaching interests, which are not always consonant with Israeli interests.
So Israeli interests for a long time, as relating to the threats from Hamas or Hezbollah or Syria, was what Israelis called mowing the grass. So mowing the grass is taking out the most dangerous threat before it gets you, but stopping short of full-scale warfare. And for years, that's sort of been Israel's mechanism, which is in some ways like the American mechanism. Avoid the war as long as you can, keep things reasonably peaceful, keep things reasonably low-key. Is that gone now in Israel? Is the willingness to put off the battle still there?
this thought is, reached some people here. By the way, I'm the author of the Mowing the Grass article.
I had no idea. I did not know that.
Yes, I'm the author. And frankly, I still believe that mowing the grass is a good strategy, but it was not implemented. I think we should have mowed the grass more frequently. And we allowed Hamas the time to become stronger, to train for a longer time, to accumulate more missiles. And so the strategy probably was right. Also, the strategy of dividing between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, I think it was the right strategy, but it was not well implemented. So, by the way, if we talk about, I'm sure there's a question about the day after, What is the day after? The day after, people have so many plans, the UN, Arab forces to bring the PA. All this is nonsense. What we'll see, because Hamas, even if it will be, militarily destroyed, will have dormant cells in Gaza, and they will not allow anybody to rule over Gaza. And even if we put other forces there, they will run away from Hamas terrorism. And maybe in 10 years, I'm optimistic, we'll have to mow the grass again. Because, as I mentioned, Hamas is not a movement that can be eliminated from Earth. It is a movement deeply rooted in Palestinian political culture and within the population. If we have elections today, and some Americans, naive Americans, want elections to prove that the PA is democratic, they will win the elections. Hamas, Haniyeh will be the prime minister. So this is what we want. So it's there. My recipe for ending the war is to have a Somalia. Chaos is not bad for Israel.
So if you need to
because
mow the
main requirement for ending the war is to preserve freedom of action of the IDF in Gaza. And any other force will be a limitation of our freedom of action.
Or perhaps you have to get rid of the government in Iran, because maybe in 10 years, if you want to be an optimist, in 10 years, if the government in Iran is not there to arm it, train it, fund it, and to promote it, is it possible that something even deeply rooted, look, there's a difference between wanting Palestinian statehood, obviously, and wanting a Hamas government that sees its goal as the elimination of Israel. Taking Iran out of the equation, would that change the way things work in the Palestinian territories, West Bank as well as Gaza?
I don't know if your audience is aware. I've advocated a preemptive attack on Hezbollah before. I wrote a piece on the road to Tehran goes via, the road to Natanz goes via Beirut. And but it's a question, what do we do first, Iran or Hezbollah? I think now it's clear that first we finish Hamas, and then we have to go to take care of Hezbollah, which will weaken, of course, Tehran and its proxies. And eventually, we have no choice, but because Iran is very close to a bomb, nuclear bomb, we have to take care of that, particularly since the Americans have no appetite for that and do not understand the terrible consequences of allowing Iran to be so close to a bomb.
But maybe the sideways question. Israel has been working with CENTCOM for the last many months, and General Kurilla, the commander of CENTCOM, has visited Israel many times and seems to be very aware of the problem of Iran and the problems of Israel. Is it a function of our politicians that we don't seem to see eye to eye on Iran? It seems that our government is still interested in a negotiation of some sort. The military may not be interested in a negotiation, but they don't rule the roost. They do what the political guys say. So what's the great benefit of Israel working with CENTCOM in ways that could eliminate the Iranian government, theoretically, if there's no political will to do it?
First of all, you are a democratic country, and the military follows the orders of the politicians, even if we don't like the politicians. We've seen a clear benefit a few days ago when an American ship intercepted missiles that were sent by the Houthis probably toward Israel. This is part of the defensive anti-air arrangements within the region that is CENTCOM, and we are part of it. We have an officer in CENTCOM headquarters with an Israeli uniform, and his family is there. So I think this is something good for us. So it's CENTCOM is participating in CENTCOM is of course better relation with the American military, and generally the American military is more supportive than Israel, as probably you mentioned, than the political level. So CENTCOM is a good development. Also allows us to cooperate with Arab countries in many ways that were not possible before.
That's good to know. That's good to keep in the back of our minds as this plays out. There is a whole second set of relationships between the Israeli military and the American military, and that's just good to keep in mind. So back to Hamas and the Gaza Strip. I don't know if Israel is holding back on the ground operation because of the United States, because it's not prepared to do it, because Israeli reasons, whatever those reasons are. Is it possible to wait too long, that Hamas could separate the hostages, that they could move things around in ways that Israel will have a harder time by waiting to go into Gaza? That's one question. Question attached to it, someone sent in. Tactical surprises in the tunnels. We're clear Hamas has tunnels. They have hostages in tunnels. They have munitions in tunnels. Is the IDF ready for something really bad, like a radioactive dirty bomb in a tunnel?
The hostages are a secondary consideration. The operation is not going, the ground invasion is not going to be affected by the fact that Hamas has hostages. We don't know how many of them are alive, by the way. If we will know about hostages, where they are, we'll probably try to rescue them. The Americans maybe will also try to rescue them if they have information about their whereabouts. So this is a separate issue. It's a humanitarian issue, and it's separate from the goal of dismantling Hamas military power. Yes, there are many tactical surprises possible. We may also have some tactical surprises for them. And this is war. War, there is the fog of war, there is friction in Clausewitzian terms, and it's going to be tough, yeah.
Really it is. So let's move on to the Israeli people and the Jewish people, because we're not exactly separable here. Ambassador Michael Oren, among other people, has said this war is an existential fight, that if Israel, created as the world's Jewish home and Jewish haven and secure space, can't fulfill that role as a haven and a secure space, which the massacres in Gaza might suggest, Israel might lose its reason for being and eventually lose its hold on both Israeli and diaspora Jews. That's the most pessimistic statement I think I've ever heard of from Michael Oren. Is it possible that Israel ceases to be the haven and that Israelis don't want to stay there and Jews don't want to support it?
I must say that I disagree with Michael Oren, whom I appreciate very much. The state of Israel was not created to be a haven only. It was created to be able to fulfill our national potential. I'm a nationalist. And in the Middle East, if we want to have a state, a national state, a nation state, we have to pay a price. And this is part of being an Israeli. It is, you know, that you may be called to reserve duty. Mothers know that they have to send their kids to service, and sometimes it's dangerous. Of course, it's our duty to provide as much possible security to our citizens. But this is not the raison d'etat. This is not the raison d'etre of the Jewish state. The Jewish state is to enable us to live a Jewish life in a Jewish state, in all its dimensions. This is Zionism. A haven we can have maybe in an island in Hawaii. But we decided not to go to an island in Hawaii, not to go to Uganda. We went to our historic homeland, the land of Israel, and knowing from the very beginning that we will face enmity and we may pay a price in blood for doing that. And every Israeli knows that. It's not a haven. That's I reject this notion. Maybe it was Herzlian notion, but not Zionism.
Okay. So there were people, to move the question a little bit, there were people that thought of the United States as a haven for Jews, and for many Jews, it was. For my extended family, it was. But what we're seeing now in the United States is a little bit different than what you see in Europe in terms of protesting against Israel and on behalf of Hamas terrorism. In the United States, it tends to be college students and people that we would think of as an American elite. They've been doing it for a long time. They're getting better at it. They're co-opting our institutions, and Israel pays a price for that. The price is increasingly ugly here. Two questions come from that. Is it too late for the facts of Israel's situation? Because no one seems to care that much about facts on Israel's side. And secondly, should Israel have shown more of the really gruesome pictures from the massacres? I know there was a lot of hesitation to show those, because even when someone dies, they're entitled to dignity. But would those have helped people understand how terrible it was?
I refuse to take a look at those videos because I didn't want my rage to cloud my judgment. Maybe we should have shown more, distributed more those atrocities, the pictures. I don't know. It's quite clear to me, and I think to everybody that has a moral compass, that it was a barbaric attack on the mere existence of Jews. I must say that Israel will survive not because of winning a propaganda war, but because of winning a war on the ground. This is what is important. It's not, to quote Ben-Gurion, it's not important what the Goyim say, it's important what the Jews do. And I understand the importance of the media. I'm now participating in the war in the media. But I know that our soldiers will determine the future of Israel more than when I speak to the BBC and the New York Times and all those networks. We have to keep it in proportion. Also, We have to remember, Jews have never been popular in the world. We have to keep it in historic proportion. Come on. When were you popular? A very short period after the Holocaust in the West. We are popular. Now we are not so popular. Okay. It's not pleasant, but what is important if we have a flourishing state and they continue to prosper despite the enmity of our environment. By the way, we are doing much better than the past. We have to keep it in proportion also.
Okay, so I don't particularly want to be popular. I'll agree with you. It's not the goal. However, when there's an organized force that is working very hard and very professionally against you to create the rage that you say you don't want to have, you don't want rage to cloud your judgment. But for some people, rage is the goal. And Jews are subject to the result of that. You saw it last night at CUNY, City University of New York, where the Jewish students were in the library and the mobs were coming and banging on the glass windows. And the librarian said, you can take refuge in the attic. In the attic, you know, like Anne Frank, you can go hide in the attic. So there is a question about the need for factual information and to play the propaganda game. I'm sorry, there's no other way to say it, because those people that are your enemies, my enemies, our enemies, want rage, they want horror, they want dead people. Don't we have to play that game as well and put our case out there in front of them?
I follow America. I like America. America is a great country, and I think it's a duty of the American police to protect its citizens. Simple. And if they are failing in this job, they should be called, you know, for them to task. I don't think America should tolerate, and I think President Biden says it openly, shouldn't tolerate anti-Semitic attacks. And what we see on campuses, those are anti-Semitic attacks. And it is terrible that the freedom of speech, a basic tenet of American democracy, is not respected on certain campuses. This is terrible. And I think many people understand that in America. I have not lost hope on America. I lived several years in America, and I understand how your politics are polarized. I believe America has the power to recuperate and become the light that it was for many years to the world. I pray for a strong and democratic America. And hopefully my prayers will be answered.
So we do too. And I like your optimism there. Some days I share it, some days I don't. So we're coming to the end of our program. And some people know that I look for an optimistic ending to this program. I can't go out on one of those down notes. So I'm going to give you a chance to be an optimist. I know you're going to take it. Before October 7th, there were enormous stresses in the Israeli population. Some of them had to do with judicial reform. Some of them had to do with the role of Haredim in the military. Some of them had to do, you know, it had to do with a lot of things. And one of my personal pet peeves is that the United States kept sticking its nose into your domestic issues. You've very nicely stayed out of our domestic issues. But then you had October 7th. And it changed everything, at least on the surface for us. You see unity in Israel among the religious people, the non-religious people, the anti-religious people, the judicial reform people. Great unity. Will it stay? Is this a way to go through this miserable period and come out on the other end with a stronger and more democratic Israel?
You know, the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, we issued a warning in June of an impending war, of deterioration of Israeli deterrence by reading the Arab and Persian press. And I told to one of my friends, I hope that we don't need a war to bring us back together. And it happened. Collectives learn difficultly, in a difficult way, and sometimes by blood. For example, Oslo. We learned the lesson of Oslo, and we paid a terrible price in blood. I'm not sure that the divisions in Israeli society will disappear after the war. I hope that some of the divisive figures will have to go away. And we'll see after the war, as we've seen after 73, by the way, a certain change in the Israeli political system. It is a worse earthquake for us, what happened. And hopefully we'll find the strength. And I think we do have the strength to be together and face the challenges that come ahead. I think we are a phenomenal people with tremendous talent and also self-destructive instincts, unfortunately. But hopefully, our optimism will prevail and we'll be together and fight back whatever it's necessary.
So that's a good note, because you expressed optimism about the United States being the power that we want it to be, the democratic, positive force in the world, and that Israel will retain its Israeliness and its place in the Jewish world and the historical Jewish world. And I think if both of those things happen, the world will be a better place. So we pray. And on that note, Ephraim Inbar, I want to thank you. This has been very broad, very deep. We didn't get to Turkey. We'll have to have you come back and talk about Turkey next time. But thank you for a really great look at what's going on in Israel, security-wise and public opinion-wise. And to our listeners, thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back.
From Jerusalem.